Hello, everybody, hello. This is Sia. Welcome to my channel if you're new. So, I wanted to make this video on a topic that is very close to my heart, I would say, because I've had maybe a few instances where I might have liked a specific person or had something deeper with a specific person, and then it couldn't really turn into anything, and that resulted in feeling very stagnant and stuck and not potentially making that much progress in life because I was just stuck, or more like not enjoying life because I was stuck in the idea of what could be. And if you've done that before yourself, if you find yourself stuck in the same place where you thought about something and what it could turn into, which it never really turned into anything, then you absolutely know what I'm talking about. And different people experience this differently. I would say potentially doesn't impact me much on a productivity level. So I can still work and be effective, at least if I'm not in the very deep stages of pain, of getting over a specific person. But after that, even if I still have thoughts of that person, I can usually still be productive and get on with work. But some people might really struggle with this as well. And these feelings they have, or the situation that has occurred where something happened, they had to break something off abruptly, potentially, or after a very short-lived experience with that person, and they started having all these imaginations and all creating all these plans about the future that are never really going to materialize. Some people really get stuck there, and that completely destroys their life, or at least really makes them press pause on life. So I haven't been impacted on that. I don't usually get impacted on that level, but I know some people are. And specifically how I get impacted, which I think is still not potentially worse, but internally it's not great. It's not a positive experience to be going through, and that is just pressing kind of pause on happiness and on just living and enjoying life, as we all should be trying to do. Life is already difficult for people, so why create more pain? And a lot of the pain we experience, it's usually pain we are giving ourselves permission to continue living through. And that's important, okay? To instead give ourselves permission to move past it and leave it behind. That's what we need to learn to do, right? So when considering this idea of getting over a person, getting over a relationship that could never be, like for example, you dated a person for a specific length of time, or you met someone at some point and maybe the time was really horrible and nothing was able to really come out of that short-lived dating experience you might have had with that person. The first thing I would do if I realized I'm still stuck, even though, this thing is not really working out for me. And I think if there is specifically a scenario where the relationship could still become a thing, but it's quite unlikely, really, the odds are not in your favor, I think it becomes even more difficult to let go and to let the person just not really live rent-free in your mind anymore. Again, it becomes a lot more difficult to do that. So I empathize with you if you are at that stage, if you are in this specific situation where something is kind of potentially on the horizon, a relationship is still potentially on the horizon, but it's just not there for whatever reason. Something is just blocking it. But the first thing I would do, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the conditions of that to be a relationship, not an actual relationship, the first thing I would do is consider and understand that in this kind of case, what you're doing is you're choosing between this person and living in the story you created around this person and choosing your own happiness. Okay, the first step is just understanding how true this idea is, that by staying stuck in this prospect of this relationship happening, you are pressing the pause button on life and on your happiness. And that could mean a lot of different things for you. It could mean having a different relationship. It could mean just exploring either dating prospects, or it could mean chasing after a goal or progressing on other facets of life that are important, because romance and romantic relationships are not the only important thing in life, right? Or pursuing other relationships outside of romance, just with friends in your life, deepening your relationships with people in your life. Okay, all these other things. So your happiness and moving closer to your happiness can mean all sorts of different things. And it's important to pinpoint what that is for you, what that happiness looks like for you. But regardless, you are making a choice there. Okay? If you're living in that story, so whatever you had with that person, you're not just thinking about what you actually had with that person, you're thinking about all the imaginary scenarios that you created in your head about what that relationship could be, because it never was. So you never really know what would have happened down the line in that relationship. Maybe it would have been everything you could have ever hoped for, but have you ever considered that it might have ended up being the worst thing for you too? That it could have really been a harmful relationship to you, or one that would never really fulfill any kind of purpose in your life, but it will just be like a dead weight. Have you ever considered that being the possible scenario instead of the happily ever after that you've created in your head? Okay, so you can ask yourself this, and a question. You can form the question, what do I choose? What do I prefer? Do I prefer staying in this story? Do I want to stay in the story that I've created in my head, or do I want to live the reality of my life? And your answer actually might be the first thing, it might be the former. And if it's the former, then it probably means you're addicted to the pain. Okay, and I completely understand that. That's why it's so difficult to move on and move forward, because we like feeling like shit, especially if that's been our experience so far in life and we've become accustomed to it. Happiness and feeling good is not something we've lived through, so we don't really fully understand what that is like. And that is a process. Moving away from that is a very, very long and complex process. For example, for myself, when I used to be in mainly painful situations in my childhood, and then I started thinking that maybe there were better things, and I wouldn't really believe that. I would still be obsessed and so in love with things being shitty. And I love the stories I was creating. I lived there, I dwelled there, and I loved it. I loved it, although I didn't really love it. You know, it's kind of an illusion that you're loving it, but you're not really loving it. But if you are as well in a very painful position, you've experienced maybe most of your life so far has been painful. You've only dealt with pain, you've already dealt with rejection, you've only dealt with not being loved, you've only dealt with being rejected so far. Then there's, of course, a lot of internal work to be done. And until you do that work, you might not be able to walk away from the pain and the fear and the stress that you've always lived in. That if that's always been your story, the story of your life, then you have to revise that story completely, which is what I'm going to touch on as a further step in this process. But if you really are obsessed with the pain, then it's going to take more time for you to move forward and to choose relationships that feel good. Again, it's a very long process, and you might have to go through multiple relationships that don't really serve you until you really start to feel okay. Like you can actually move on and really choose happiness and really choose the good things, because right now it doesn't really feel like a realistic reality for you. I didn't mean to go down this route and start talking about this, but I think it's very relevant. And in my experience, when I started getting to know different kinds of people, perhaps that treated me better than the old experiences I had had, slowly I started to recognize, hey, this feels better. So why do I keep choosing the thing that feels like shit? Because that's what I'm used to, right? I've been kind of programmed to think that's what I need to be seeking in real life. Like that's the only comfortable thing. But slowly, as you try to make healthier choices, which feel awkward and weird initially because you're not used to them, you start to, let's say, habituate. Okay? You sort of habituate those in those new situations. So that basically just means habituation is a process where you become used to something, right? When, for example, you might visit a new house, it might smell different to what you're used to, and you're gonna pick up on that smell. Like maybe you noticed that in your childhood when you visited, I don't know, one of your parents' friends, and you smell their home and they smell different to your own home. But then after like an hour or a couple of hours, you got accustomed to the smell. That is a process of habituation, and it doesn't happen immediately, right? You're not just going to enter the different house, a different environment, and you're gonna take in the smell, and then suddenly, just in a minute, you're going to get used to it. No, it usually takes time. And the same thing is going to happen when you start choosing your happiness. It's going to start feeling better slowly and slowly and slowly, very slowly. So after you've done that and consider this and you've decided, I'm actually choosing my happiness, this feels good, this feels better, my goals, the other relationships I could have, all they feel better. All of them feel better. The other thing you want to do is actually revisit the story you've created around this person. All right. What you might want to do is actually take out a piece of paper and write out what that story looks like. Okay. So that would involve you considering what are the fantasies I have in my head about this relationship that never actually became a relationship. What exactly am I grieving here that didn't get to happen? Right? Write out the story. What are you giving out? What kind of story have you created in your head? So, for example, maybe you've been telling yourself that your relationship could look this way, that that you, if you were together with that person, that you could be doing X and Y. Okay, like say you might be thinking in your head, oh, we'll be waking up next to each other every day and I'll feel so happy, and I am going to um have this wonderful deep connection with this person, and we'll be spending time together and watching films and exploring the world. We would be traveling together. We would love each other so much. We would be the center of each other's world. um these kinds of things. And you might also specifically want to revisit the sad story you've created about this not having turned into the thing you wanted it to turn into. So you might be saying, for example, yeah, we would have all these things that I'm thinking about, that I've visualized, that I've imagined. We would have all those things, but right now it just doesn't work out. This person really loves me. I know it. They really like me so much and they want to have this with me so much, but we can't have it together. But we have something so deep and so wonderful together. And I know it. I know it in my heart. I feel it. If that's your story, it's going to be probably something like this. And you are continue telling yourself this, okay? You're continuing telling yourself this story every time you think about this person, every time you're thinking about why this couldn't work for you, you're thinking about this story. Okay? You're thinking about it. And what you need to do is kill that story. At least kill it for now. Perhaps you're going to open a new chapter in the future, and maybe that person will be in that chapter. But right now, the story needs to die and the chapter needs to close. Okay? The chapter needs to close right now for your real life story to start taking place, which will actually be more wonderful than the fantasy. Again, it will be you choosing the happiness, and that will feel good. It will feel better, right? Because it will be real life. You will actually be waking up to this other person. You will actually have this deep connection with the person in that new relationship that's actually really happening for you. You would actually have that, and it is going to be better because it will be real. You will really have a person that's supporting you, for example. You will really have a person that tells you they love you or that show you affection. You will have that in real life, right? Our imagination is very powerful, and it can feel like real life, and so it's easy for us to get stuck in the imagination. It's very easy, but again, it's not real life. Okay, and alongside this, you want to also pay attention to other things you do outside of just what you think about in your head. For example, how do you talk about this person or this potential relationship that could have happened? How do you talk about it to other people? Okay? For instance, one thing I've noticed in myself is that as I'm talking to different people, and when the idea of relationships comes up, when the idea of relationships comes up, what I do is I say again, I say that story again, the story of, yeah, I'm in this very sad situation and I have this happening and that happening, and it just can't work out, or it's just this, I have something special with this person and whatever. I realized that I was telling the same things over and over to people, and that kept me stuck in the same story, even though I was kind of telling myself I'm not stuck there anymore. But real life was telling me something different. It was telling me that I am stuck. It was telling me I'm stuck, and I wanted to pretend that I'm not stuck, but I was. What do? and what you think is real evidence of what's actually happening in your head and whether you are actually living in those stories. And maybe you're not ready to press pause on the story yet. And that's also fine. Maybe you need time to still sit on it, to still feel the pain. But at some point, you know you will need to do this. You know you will need to get back to your life and out of this painful loop, right? And the last part is the most exciting part, which is that you need to write a different story, okay? Rewrite the story and write a different one. Some new story that will get you excited, okay? That will be the new story of your new life, where you are more fulfilled, where maybe you're fulfilling yourself, where you're showing yourself the love that you can't get from that person. That can be your new life, and you can feel excited about that, and you can write that out. Write out the revised story. Write out the new story. Or it could be a new story with someone completely different. And to really get yourself excited, you can think about every single fact you want about the new person you could be with and the new actual real relationship you could have with that person. Maybe you can imagine them in your head. What do they look like? And turn them into a different person. Maybe think about a different person that looks attractive to you. Okay? Think about the traits this person would have. Think about how much they would love you. Think about how great the relationship would actually be in real life, and start basically manifesting this new relationship. I suppose you will start manifesting that new relationship in this way, because you're writing out what a person looks like, how you feel with them. But create any story that gets you excited, so you don't feel the need to go back to the old story that has no place in your life because it doesn't bring you happiness. Okay? That's it. Okay? So to close off this video, I'm going to say that if you're still stuck in this story and you want to stay stuck in that story, you still have your feelings to process through, you're not ready to start thinking about new relationships, you're not ready to generally be in relationships because maybe you feel like something else is taking priority in your life right now. Whatever it is, you should take your time with it. All of this is a process and you shouldn't rush it, because if you still have very strong feelings that are not going away, then maybe you need to do something with those feelings. You need to still sit with them and still analyze them and process them, and then go through this process whenever you feel ready. But whenever you feel ready, this video will be here. And that's it with this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, and I wish you the best of luck in getting over this personal relationship you could never really have, and going headfirst into a real life experience that is going to be, I assure you, 10 times better than you living in your head. Okay? I'll see you in my next video.